Early in 1851, many San Francisco merchants faced bankruptcy at the hands of well-organized gangs of robbers. My job as city marshal was to find the boss thief of San Francisco and those helping him. Hold it!
Californians.
California, I've come to live where life is best. In the Golden West, I'm gonna strike it rich in California. California.
Well, if it ain't Harry Wilkins. You get him, Matt?
Oh, Mr. Bender here did. Sheriff grabbed some men and combed Sydney town for a green freight wagon. There'll be blood on it. You notify the coroner. And now, Mr. Bender, do you mind telling me what a member of the Board of Aldermen would be doing in a place like this under these circumstances?
Well, for one thing, I was saving your life. I live near here, Marshal. Shall we continue the conversation at my home?
Good idea.
You're late, Albert. It's damp out. I don't hold with such hours. Oh.
Nellie, say hello to Marshal Wayne. Marshal, this is my wife.
How do you do?
Great pleasure to know you, ma'am.
I saved the Marshal's life, Nellie. I had to kill a man to do it.
I don't hold with killing. Unless it's in a worthy cause.
I certainly hope you consider me a worthy cause.
I've heard things about you, Marshal. I suppose you'd like your snack now, Albert?
It'll settle my nerves.
Excuse me.
Sit down, Marshal.
Thank you.
Now, as to the reason for my being at the scene of the robbery. As a member of the Board of Aldermen, I have taken it upon myself to investigate crime in San Francisco. My colleagues have given me a secret fund for that purpose. The most vicious crime today is the wholesale robbery of our merchants.
Yes, I've been spending a great deal of time trying to find out who's responsible for it.
But you don't have the funds for buying information, and I do.
Glass of milk, Mr. Wayne?
Oh, no, thank you, ma'am.
That's all we have. I don't hold with liquor. Liquor is the root of all evil.
I heard the same thing about money. You were saying, Mr. Bender?
I have a great deal of information about the robberies, Marshal, especially the receivers of stolen goods.
A piece of cake, Mr. Wayne?
No, thank you.
Heaven knows we can't afford cake. Not with eggs selling for $1 apiece. It's criminal, the prices they charge. Why don't you investigate that, Albert?
It's out of my control, my dear. As I say, Marshal, we trust you.
Except that you're a gambling man, Mr. Wayne. I don't hold with gambling. You might as well understand that.
There are worse things. Mr. Bender, I'd appreciate any information you have on receivers of stolen goods.
Here's the list, Marshal. Names and addresses, and the kind of stolen goods to look for.
Are you sure of your information?
Positive.
And I don't hold with smoking, Mr. Wayne. Well, I thank you to put that cigar away.
As you wish. That's a beautiful brooch.
The only luxury I've ever allowed myself. It has a picture of Walter in it. I think I'd rather have Walter dead than see him drinking or gambling.
Walter's our son, Marshal. He's at a fine college in the East.
Walter's going to be a gentleman, a great man. I think that's all I live for, Mr. Wayne, to see my son a great man. This city isn't a fit place for a boy like Walter to grow up in, Mr. Wayne. That's more important than warehouse robberies. Why don't you clean out the dives, the gambling dens? Send the painted women packing. The Jezebels who corrupt boys like Walter, bring them down into the flaming pit.
Now, my dear. Keep calm. Marshal, you have the list. I want those places raided tomorrow at the latest.
Not without search warrants.
Judge Whitaker will have the warrants for you in the morning.
Never mind that, Mr. Wayne. First, I want you to raid the cesspools of sin. Make this a decent place for boys like Walter to live in. Do you hear me?
Good night, ma'am. What are you doing lurking about here?
I wasn't lurking about. I waited to see you.
What about?
Willie Wilkins has been home.
What, Harry's brother?
Oh, reared by the same sainted mother we was.
And a great credit to her you are. Fine pair of thieves.
Not me, Governor. It was Harry who was the black sheep of the family.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do you want to see me about?
To tell you that Harry was hired to kill you.
Oh, I see. You wanted to get on my good side by telling me something I already know. All right, who paid him for the job?
Nobody. And that's the rub. He was to have been paid after he'd done the job. I always did tell Harry cash in advance or no murder, but he wouldn't listen to nobody.
Well, who was supposed to have paid him?
I don't know. But if I find out, what's there in it for me?
It might save you from the gallows.
Well, we just locked up the last of those 10 men. Gotta hand it to Alderman Bender. His information was 100% good.
I wonder,
About what?
did you notice any peculiar coincidence about this list of suspects?
Nope. Well, anyway, our job's all done.
Now, Shab, what makes you think our job is done because we lock a man up?
Well, ain't it?
Sometimes. But other times it just begins. I'm going over and have a talk with Alderman Bender.
Oh, Mr. Wayne, come in. I'm so glad you came. I just had the most distressing news. I'm at my wit's end.
What's the trouble?
A letter from my son, Walter. He's coming here. His ship will dock any day now.
What's so upsetting? I thought you'd be glad to see him.
Not now. Not here, not in this Sodom of the city. Mr. Wayne, you've got to shut down the dives, the sinful gambling dens.
Young men don't get into trouble unless they go asking for it.
That's just it. Oh, Albert, we're only here.
I want to see your husband. Where is he?
I don't know. What do you want to see him about?
Those arrests we've been making lately. I'd like to check his source of information.
They're guilty, all of them. Sinners, profligates, evil men.
Tell me, Mrs. Bender, what does your husband do for a living?
What difference does that make?
Surely he's not living on the salary of a San Francisco alderman.
What do you mean by that, Mr. Wayne? Why are you standing here making insinuations against my husband when you should be making this a decent place to live in? Don't you understand? Walter will be here any day now.
I certainly hope he approves of us. If anybody should come asking for me, I'll be down at that warehouse that was robbed the other night, looking for evidence.
Feeling all right now?
Yes, I'm all right. But there's something I just don't understand.
Some things I don't understand, Mr. Bender. For instance, you came into that warehouse to kill me tonight, didn't you?
I did no such thing. I was afraid for your safety. It's a hangout for thieves and murderers.
You should know, seeing as you own it. Under an assumed name, of course. I found that out from the city records.
Why, yes, I do own it. But I only discovered recently it was being used for illegal purposes. How can you accuse me of such a terrible thing, Marshal?
For one thing, there was something awfully peculiar about that list of suspects you gave me.
But your men found the evidence in every place that I named.
Because it was planted there for them to find.
What makes you think that?
6 of those suspects are in the hay, grain, and feed business. What business are you in, Mr. Bender?
Why, I'm a financier.
Oh? Well, under still another name, you're also in the hay, grain, and feed business.
Well, you see, Nellie gave our son Walter the impression that I was a banker.
Are your son's sensibilities so fine that he'd object to the family name on a honest business?
Well, you know how these Eastern colleges are, Marshal. The young men who go there look down on commerce. What does this prove, anyway?
To me, it proves that you tried to eliminate your competition by planting evidence on them. As the head of a gang of thieves, that'd be awfully easy for you to do, wouldn't it?
How can you believe such a terrible thing against me, Marshal? I'm an alderman. I saved your life.
That, too, was under peculiar circumstances. You tipped me off to a robbery, and then you deliberately killed one of your own men to try and win my confidence.
I refuse to talk to you anymore, Marshal. I demand that you send for my lawyer.
All right, we'll send for him. Meantime, Shab, suppose you lock him up.
You've done a monstrous thing, Marshal. This will kill my wife. It'll kill her.
Say nothing of what it'll do to dear Walter.
Well, we sure enough got the goods on that bird.
If we can convict him on this charge, maybe he'll spill the rest.
What do you mean, if we can convict him?
The preliminary hearings are in the court of Judge Whitaker, the man who issued these warrants.
You don't trust Judge Whitaker?
He's no more dishonest than most of our judges. So far, he's resisted the temptation to sell the courthouse.
I understand you've placed my husband under arrest, Marshal.
How did you find that out, Mrs. Bender?
From a little man with a Cockney accent.
Willie Wilkins?
He didn't give his name. Is it true, Mr. Wayne?
Yes.
On what possible charge?
That warehouse your husband was defending against robbery the other night belongs to him. It's full of stolen goods.
That's absurd. Albert doesn't have a warehouse.
Perhaps he's been withholding things from you.
He wouldn't dare. You've made a terrible mistake, Marshal. Release him immediately.
I'm afraid that'd be impossible.
But he's innocent.
He'll have a hearing tomorrow on those charges. If he is innocent, you have a chance to prove it.
You hate my husband, don't you?
I'm not exuberantly fond of him.
You hate him because he's fighting for law and order, spoiling your graft. Well, I'll expose you, Marshal. I'll see that you're brought to justice. I despise you, Mr. Wayne. How I despise you.
She ain't exuberantly fond of you, neither.
Mm-hmm. No, it's just that she wants to make this a fit city for Walter to live in.
Understand, Mr. Bender, this is not a trial. It is merely a hearing to determine if there is reason to hold you for trial. How do you plead?
Not guilty, Your Honor.
I've studied the evidence, and I concur in that plea, Mr. Bender. I agree that ownership of a warehouse does not prove guilty knowledge of stolen goods. Case dismissed.
Just a minute, Your Honor. You forgot something.
What?
You forgot to give him a medal.
Come in. What are you doing here? Haven't you persecuted us enough?
Where's your husband, Mrs. Bender?
You should know that. Didn't you send for him?
No, I didn't.
A man came here. He looked like a thug, but he had a badge. He said you wanted to see Albert at the warehouse.
When did this man come here?
Half an hour ago. What's wrong? What's happened to my husband?
I don't know, but I better find him. Bender, who shot you?
Him. I hate him.
Who?
Walter.
Mrs. Bender.
You did this. You killed him. Albert! Albert!
Now listen. Either we find Willie Wilkins, or I'll send a raiding squad down here and tear this place apart. You understand? Tell me you're ready to talk, Willie.
Yes, I'll talk. I tell you, I didn't follow Mr. Bender last night to kill him. I was just trying to collect an honest debt, I was.
What do you mean, what debt?
Well, what he owed me brother Harry for trying to kill you.
So Bender did hire Harry?
Yes. You see, Harry was blackmailing him. So Mr. Bender agrees to pay off Harry by hiring Harry to kill you. Then he crosses Harry, makes you think he's a bloomin' hero, and it don't cost him nothing.
So then you took up where Harry left off and you proceeded to blackmail Bender.
Well, yes, I guess you could call it something like that. But that Mr. Bender, ooh, he's a tight one in all his dealings.
All his dealings? What other dealings do you have with him?
Just business. Me and some of the other coves, including Harry, robbing warehouses and ships and things like that.
I see. Willie, I want you to tell me what happened the night he was killed.
Well, I just followed him from his home.
Who was with him?
There wasn't nobody with him. When he came to the warehouse, I waited till I was thirsty. Then I went down to the pub for a drink. I came back, and I heard a shot.
You should have, seeing it was you that fired it. You were robbing him when I came in.
I was not robbing him. I was just trying to collect an honest debt, I was. He didn't have much in his pockets.
Search him. Where'd you get this?
I found it in Bender's hand.
Lock him up.
You're not going to hang me, are you, Marshal? Just think of me poor old sainted mother.
So Alderman Bender was the boss thief all along, huh?
No. The boss thief was the one who killed Alderman Bender.
You mean Willie Wilkins?
Who? I don't mean Willie Wilkins.
Come in. Mr. Wayne, it was kind of you to come. I'm sorry I spoke harshly to you last night, but I was out of my mind with grief.
Well, well, Mrs. Bender. You knew all along that your husband was a thief, didn't you?
Mr. Wayne, I'm ill. The doctor said I wasn't to be disturbed. Why are you saying such a horrible thing?
You can forget all that. Willie Wilkins confessed. We're going to get other confessions, too.
I was afraid something like this would happen. Albert should have been more careful of his associates.
It's all your fault. You forced him to do it. I know that now. But why?
Albert was a failure at everything he ever touched.
So he framed his competitors in the feed business?
Them out of the way, he could have made an honest living again.
There are other ways to make an honest living, you know.
But there wouldn't have been enough money. Our son was to be a gentleman. He had to be a gentleman.
To the extent that his mother was willing to commit crime on his behalf?
Walter needed all the things that go with college, Mr. Wayne. Clothes, a carriage, spending money. Besides, I didn't commit any crimes. Mr. Bender did.
But you forced him to do it.
You don't understand, Mr. Wayne. I needed the money for Walter.
I wonder how Walter will feel when he finds out that his mother is a murderess.
You must be out of your mind.
Willie Wilkins took this from your dying husband's hand. Remember it? Walter's picture in it?
The only luxury I ever allowed myself.
Why did you kill him?
He was weak. He was afraid his associates were going to kill him. Said he was going to your office to confess, to ask for protection. I followed him. You can see I had to do what I did.
Funny. You don't hold with smoking. You don't hold with drinking, but you don't bat an eye at murder.
I couldn't let Walter find out his father was a confessed thief, could I?
Well, he will find out as soon as I arrest you.
But you aren't going to arrest me, are you, Mr. Wayne?
Oh, why not?
Judge Whitaker was very reasonable. How much do you want, Mr. Wayne, within reason, that is?
Well, I'll be,
I don't hold with swearing, Mr. Wayne. Things are bad enough as they are. Now, let's settle our business, and you can get on about your duties.
No, I'm afraid you'll have to come along with me, Mrs. Bender.
If you won't be reasonable, I'll have to kill you. Please believe me.
Don't worry. I believe you.
Walter. Oh, darling Walter. No. No, not in there with those painted women. Walter will be here any time now.
You mean she was the boss thief of San Francisco?
That's right, Shab. She was. And here comes the reason now.
Walter, forgive me, son. I did it all for you. I love you so.
Do you?
I've lived my whole life for you.
You've lived mine, too.
I wanted you to have things. I wanted you to be a gentleman.
Well, it isn't too late. Where's the money, Mother?
I won't tell you. It'll ruin you. You'll spend it on evil things. Oh, Walter, don't you love me anymore?
Do you want me to laugh in your face?
How sharper than a serpent's tooth. Thus Nellie began to pay in full measure for her crimes. Now I could understand why Albert Bender hated his son with his dying breath. His mother had warned him about this kind of woman. His leg was broken, but what hurt Nellie the most was that he was no gentleman. He swore horribly.
California. Oh, I've traveled here, I've traveled there. I guess I've been most everywhere. But I like where I am today, and here is where I'll stay. Now, one thing I just can't endure is being broke and being poor. So I come west to take the cure, and here is where I'll stay. I've come to California, California. There's gold in them there hills in California. I've come to live where life is best, in the golden west. I'm gonna strike it rich in California, California, California. There's gold in them there hills in California.